Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? This is Amanda. I'm laughing because I've got the spirit of the late, great David Niven with me today. And this is the third take. I only got about 2 minutes into the video, but I had to keep clearing my throat. And he's just making me laugh because he's reminding me of the making of films and all of the different takes and outtakes that there are when you film that nobody ever sees. So yeah, we are basically going to be spending some time with David Niven, who was a British actor, novelist and writer. And when his energy sort of came to me within the last couple of weeks, I wondered whether it was more a personal connection. I wasn't entirely sure whether too many people would remember David. Apologies, David. But he died in the 1980s, and yeah, he was British, but how many people would remember him? And I was completely and utterly blown away, as was he, by the number of people who were just like, oh, please, please bring him through. We can't wait to hear from him again. We loved David Niven. So if you've never seen any of his films in particular, I'm just going to give you a couple of good ones to go and rewatch. They were a real mixture, actually, and the story as to why I am sat here today about to do this channeling was that he came through to me as a medium after I watched Death on the Nile, which is an old Agatha Christie book. And I watched it about 2 or 3 weeks ago. My daughter's quite into Agatha Christie. She's studying her work at the moment with her English studies. And to be perfectly honest, I had actually... I feel awful saying this in front of him, but it's also like I had forgotten about him. And then as soon as his character came onto the film, it was like falling in love again with an old friend. That's really what it felt like. It was like, oh, I had forgotten David. And all of the films that I used to watch when I was a teenager, or just aware of his presence. He just seems to be one of these characters, and the word character is very important with him. He was a real character, and he just felt like he was always around. So yeah, it was just reacquainting myself with his energy. So that was my reintroduction to him. But some of his other films that he did, Guns of Navarone, my husband wanted us to mention. Guns of Navarone, Bridge on the River Kwai he was in, Around the World in 80 Days. He was in the Pink Panther films, A Matter of Life and Death, or Stairway to Heaven, I think as it was rebranded, is an amazing film about, it's about a lot of things. Maybe I'll ask him to explain what that is later on in the film. You see, this almost feels like I'm on a film set. And let me just finish off the other films. Separate Tables would be another one. They're the ones that, somebody else mentioned, because you're all so excited about him coming forward. Somebody said to me that he was also in a film called Appointment with Venus, which is quite interesting because his energy is very linked into the planet Venus, as was the last person I channeled on my channel here on YouTube, which was Princess Diana. So David's coming in on the back of Princess Diana and the Venus connection, but I'll get to that in a moment. Right, where shall we start with David? Let's start with when he was born, okay, and tell you a little bit about his colour numerology, which explains a little bit about who he was before I actually formally bring him in. Although I can see him so clearly, he's sort of sitting there, over there, in a chair, which is actually, it's a wicker chair in my room, but now I'm looking at it, it could be a director's chair. It feels as though he's sitting in a director's chair and he's got his arms crossed like this, but not in self-defense. It's more just curiosity. It's as though he's really like wanting to hear what we have to say about him, because his energy is very much along the lines of, I'm so glad that anybody even remembers me, but equally there's this thing about like dusting off the glad rags to be here again, really interested to be, what he's talking about, interviewed. And he wanted me to say a little bit about being interviewed versus channeling before I get to his date of birth. So, because he's very interested in the realm of spirituality. I don't know whether he was when he was alive, but certainly the other side of the veil he is. He's interested in this work. And he says the way to explain it to people is very much like when he used to do interviews on television. Parkinson was a famous interview that's still up on YouTube. You can watch that, it's fantastic. But a good interviewer like Michael Parkinson would have researched his subject matter, i.e. David Niven, very well before sitting down to interview him. And I have researched him well before doing so today. And that almost goes against the grain of some medium work, which is like you're supposed to appear on a stage from behind a curtain and like, is anybody there? And then you've got to give all this proof and evidence that they are here. And it's a bit like a magical mystery tour, and it's like, it's all smoke and mirrors. He's saying that stuff. It's all smoke and mirrors. He's saying a good medium actually takes the time and has the respect for the person that they are going to be channeling to have actually looked into their life or dipped into it a little bit, so they know which are the important areas to then ask them questions about. And so he's very respectful of the way that I work. Because he's comparing me a bit like an interviewer, but he's saying who you're interviewing now is somebody in spirit. So just quite interesting for those of you that follow other channelers and how other people work, or maybe you're a potential channeler yourself. Think about it as sitting as an interviewer with spirit, and to get the best interviews or the best interactions with anybody, whether they're alive or dead, it helps to know a little bit about them. Okay. Right. Okay. So he was born the 1st of March 1910. God, that makes me sound old, he says. 1st of March 1910. I think one of the reasons that he particularly came dropping by is because we are still in the energy of March. And it was around the first week of March that I became aware of his energy. So yeah, born 1st of March 1910. If you look at his numerology, he works out as a 1, 15, 6. So number 1 is linked into somebody who's always going to be center stage. Number 1 is the energy of the leader. It's linked into the energy of the sun. It's the one who shines very brightly. It can be also linked into ego. At the end of the day, we'll come back to the question of ego because he has something to say about that. At the end of the day, to be an actor, you have to believe in yourself. 15 is the energy of the magician. It's also very linked into the divine feminine. It has an olive green colour. I want to say a little bit more about the whole energy of women around David, because that's one of the big areas we're going to look at with this channeling. Not the only area. We're also going to look at Hollywood. We're going to look at war and his writing, amongst other things. So we have the sun, yellow, 15, which is linked into magic, and the divine feminine, olive green. And then 1 and 5 make 6. So that is a planetary energy. So he's got 2 planetary energies in his colour numerology, the sun and Venus, because 6 is Venus. 6 is linked into the colour pink. Venus is about love, it's about relationships. And in many ways it's quite sad, because although he had 2 particularly big relationships in terms of marriages in his life, there was sadness. That ran through his relationship history, and you know, the energy of the Venus energy, very much like Princess Di, it's linked into having to do the inner work to really work out whether you can love yourself. So I suspect both David and Diana, the 2 Ds, he's saying, had issues to do with actually loving themselves and accepting themselves for who they are or were, because they've obviously evolved and moved on in spirit. The thing with the sun and Venus together is interesting, because the sun throws a spotlight on anything. So the sun is forming a spotlight on his relationship with women, because Venus is very linked into the energy of Mother Mary, for example, the feminine principle. And I feel very strongly as though he placed women on a pedestal to a degree, worshipped them, my dear, he's saying, worshipped them. But it was complicated, is what he's saying. It was complicated. We'll come back to that as well. He was born on St. David's Day, which is the reason he was called David. Hence the daffodils in the little altar that I've got there for him. Daffodils are the sign of St. David. So he's born on St. David's Day. His son also was then called David. And there is a very strong linkage to the line of David. And David, number one, means beloved. And if you actually look at that word beloved and then break it down, it is about be loved. So a lot of his energy through his lifetime was about trying to be loved. So he found himself in the arms of many different women. But ultimately it was all about trying to fill this need within himself to be loved. And so that's quite interesting. I've never thought about beloved and be loved like that before. But even though his, I'm wanting to say, he's using the word excursions with women were varied and many, and multiple, he's saying, because he owns everything that he was and did through his lifetime. He doesn't regret anything. Je ne regrette rien, he's saying. There is this thing about just the need for love, the need for loving, the need for tenderness, the need for gentleness, and that all goes with the Venus energy. I really get this strong feeling of how much he worshipped women and just adored being around women. And yes, you could say he was a ladies' man, and I was, he says, but ultimately it wasn't. If he's saying through one lens, particularly today's lens in the 21st century, it would be judged as maybe sleazy behaviour, because there was a lot of women around him and in his bed, not at all the same time, he's saying. He wants me to clarify that point. But there was just this adoration and this want to, this deep want to explore the female body and the female energy. And I feel as though next time he comes back, he will actually be a woman if he decides he wants to come back. Just the mysteries of the feminine are there to be unravelled. Okay. Anyway, yeah, so David, born on St. David's Day, his son also called David. David is also linked into the line of David, which was, he was an Old Testament king, one of the Old Testament kings, David. And actually lineage runs all the way through his energy signature as well, because we've got the lineage of King David, and actually all Davids to a degree touch on that, because there's more to a name than just I'm giving you a name because it sounds pretty, or it sounds, I don't know what the equivalent would be for a man, because I've never had sons, so I've never had to think about what to name a son. But it's the same with daughters. I wanted a name that was pretty or sounded nice or whatever, but it's much, much deeper than that. So one of my daughters, for example, is called Sophie, and that's to do with wisdom bringer. My other daughter's called Lucy, that's to do with light bringer. You've got to look into the meanings behind names. That it's a bit like, it's interesting. Okay, what David's saying to me is, I've never thought about this before, is I believe that we choose our parents before we incarnate, but what he's saying to me is we also choose our names, including the crazy ones, he's saying, the crazy names. So there's this thing about the name does always fit the child. and it's linked into the lineage of that child through many lifetimes. It doesn't mean that in every lifetime, if you keep coming back as a man, you're always going to be called David. But it just means that in the lifetime that, for example, you were called David, you have an opportunity to, as an example with that name, rise like a king, to show kingly qualities, to certainly show authority, which can be good or bad. Think about the qualities of kingship. It's about leadership. It's about sovereignty. You may very well struggle with it, but there's lessons within the name that you are born with, in the same way that there are lessons and gifts within the date upon which you were born as well. We know that from astrology, but it's the same with names. Okay. The other thing I wanted to say, just to introduce him, is that astrologically, I had a quick look at his astrology chart, 75% is water or air. So there's not as much earth in particular. And I think he was somebody who always found it quite hard to root himself. So in terms of being an actor, that would always have been a very good profession for him, because he was able to dip in and out of different roles, and anchor those roles for a time and become them, but to not be able to hold the energy of them all of the time. So acting would have been a perfect profession for him, to dip in and out of different energies, anchor them, and then move on. Because ultimately, one of his challenges in life was the fact that he felt rootless. So again, this explains the whole thing about needing to be loved, okay? Needing the nourishment of love to root, because he didn't have that. I'm just going to go and close the windows because somebody's got a loud thing out there. Hold on. I know you often tell me you can't hear the outside noises, but I can, and they distract me. So it's quite interesting. I was just talking about the fact that he found it hard to root, but also hard to focus. He talked about that in his life. Okay. Right, let me just tell you a couple of, before we get to the questions for him, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the story as of some of the signs that he's given me that he's around as well. Let's have a look at some of the beautiful photographs as well. I love this one. This is him as an older man, and I just think they say that you get the face that you deserve as you get older. And there's one of the things I loved about his energy, and he's still got it, is he had a very self-deprecating sense of humour, which us Brits are quite good at. We don't take ourselves too seriously, and we're able to laugh at ourselves. And there is a famous quote of David, which is something along the lines of, he talks about his face looking like 2 slapped halibut or something, or 2 slapped haddock. And it didn't, of course. He had a beautiful face, but there's just this thing about being able to laugh at yourself. And I just think that is a face that has weathered many storms. There's such kindness in his eyes as well, such kindness in his eyes. So here's another picture of him, and very blue eyes, very Venusian. Is that such a word? Because if you think about Princess Diana and her blue eyes, David Niven and his blue eyes, there's something about blue eyes which is a nod to the energy of Venus, okay? For some reason, don't ask me why, but that's what I've just been told. Okay, so yes, so I'm sitting watching Death on the Nile, suddenly get reacquainted with David Niven. Oh God, I'd forgotten about him. He was great. Didn't think much more about it. And I've told you this if you follow me on social media, but I will just put it all on this video. I then, the following day or a couple of days later, I was just driving past a charity shop round the corner from me, and in the window is this huge book called Niven. So obviously it's a David Niven book. And you know, I don't think I've ever seen a David Niven book in a charity shop window before. And I literally nearly crashed the car because I was like, I couldn't believe the synchronicity. So I said to myself, if the book's still there on Monday morning, I'll go back and get it. And the interesting thing was, I have to show you something on my phone, that as I walked up the road to get the book, there is another shop beside it, and it is an art shop. And I'm hoping I've still got the picture of this. Anyway, in the art shop window, did I delete it? Was this painting. This painting, I don't know whether you can make that out. It's basically of 3 horses. Because, and those of you that understand where I'm going with this, the second book that David wrote was called Bring on the Empty Horses. And this book is Bring on the Empty Horses and his other best-selling book, which was called When the Moon's a Balloon. So before I even get into the shop to buy this book, I'm seeing this picture of the horses, and I just knew it was him saying, yeah, go on, that book's meant for you. You're meant to go and get it. It's an amazing book, and I want to read you just a little bit from it in a moment. But the other thing was I felt him very much around me when I actually bought the book, because it was in the window and it was £15. Now, this is a charity shop, okay? That's expensive for a charity shop. Certainly in the UK, you'd probably expect it to be a lot cheaper than that, but it was £15. But I can afford £15, and I knew this was linked to my work, and I thought, no, I'm quite happy to pay the £15. So I go in and I ask the lady to get it out of the shop window, which is a real palaver because she's got to climb over different things. And it's a little old lady, because all these shops are run by charity, volunteers, and they tend to be older women in my area. And I said, do you want me to get it? No, I can do it. So I thought, okay. So she retrieves the book from the window. And then there's another old lady who's also working in the shop. And they start to, I don't know, I just got the energy that they were bickering a little bit. One of them was trying to boss the other one around and tell her what to do. And then she went out of the back. And this other woman who sold me the book rolled her eyes at me as if to say, oh God, she never stops, this woman. So I just smiled at her and thought, okay, none of my business, I'm going to stay out of it. And the lady on the till said to me, she said, okay, you realise you can get 3 books for £1, don't you? You can get 3 books for £1. And I said to her, oh, but it says it's £15 and I'm quite happy to pay that. And she said, oh, well, I better just go and check. So she went into the back, and I could hear this discussion going on about the price of the book. And she came back and she said, oh, no, that one is £15. And she looked really sheepish because she'd been told off by the other woman. And I just felt David's energy around me after I paid up and I left the shop. And he said to me, well done and thank you. And it was linked into one of the things and the qualities that he had he had impeccable manners and etiquette and an ethical code, basically. And he said something along the lines of, I love the fact that you didn't, it's almost like you noticed the belittling of this other lady and you didn't try and get away with paying £1, and then she would have been told off. What if you let that book go that was for 15 and you've given it away for £1 and 2 extra books on top? And it just felt as though there was an energy coming through him linked into, you did the right thing there, because A, you could afford to pay that amount of money for it. B, it was going to charity anyway. But C, it was about honesty, I suppose. It's not judging other people that would have taken it and ran for a much lesser amount, but it's almost as though that would have screwed somebody else over. She'd have got told off for it. And I just think that's very much his energy. He tried to do the best he could. So yeah, this book is just amazing. And I have to say that you can open it on any page, and it just has something to say. So I opened it this morning and I said, okay, David, right, where do I start with this video for you? And I've actually opened it right at the start of the second book, which is Bring on the Empty Horses. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of the introduction, because this is how he starts the second book. So these are his words, and then we'll go into the channeling and you can hear his words through me. So over to David. If at this moment you are in a bookstore, leafing through these early pages and wondering if the whole thing is worth a sizable expenditure, may I suggest that you keep your back towards the salesman and read on, because coming up is a brief description of what this book is all about. To be an actor is essential. It is essential to be an egomaniac. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. The supreme act of egomania is to sit down and write 130,000 words about oneself. That I have already done in The Man's a Balloon. So you'll be relieved to learn that this is not a book about David Niven. At least it's not meant to be. Unfortunately, the actor's urge to take up a firm position at centre stage is a strong one, and if, despite valiant efforts to remain in the wings, I have on occasion eased myself forward, I apologise. This book is about Hollywood, not the whole mishmash, because that has been done 100 times, and anyway the canvas is too huge and quite beyond my mini brushwork. So I have attempted to splash a little colour on just one corner, the 25 years between 1935 and 1960. I was there from extra on down or up, it's for you to decide, but I have made little effort to keep things in chronological order. The period covered in this book is hailed as the great days of Hollywood. Perhaps they were, perhaps not. But with those days gone forever, it is certainly not my intention to try and prove that they were superior to the Hollywood of today. If now Hollywood is booming and full of talent, but controlled by conglomerates, lawyers, bankers, computers, and a handful of agents, then it was booming, filled with great personalities, but controlled by arrogant moguls, overcrowded and smelling of despotism, nepotism, and blacklists. He just has this amazing way with words, really amazing way with words. And the other thing that I've noted before sitting down today to do this channeling for you is he feels as though he is a gatekeeper to a huge number of other old Hollywood stars that if I had the time, I would probably want to channel them all, but realistically, I won't be able to. But I will just mention some of the names that I've sensed around me. And, you know, by that I'm talking about literally in the last couple of days, they're all over the TV, or I'm seeing, I don't know, books or posters or references in the media. The main ones, let me just focus, is Audrey Hepburn, who I have already brought through. There is a channeling with Audrey Hepburn and Princess Diana on my Heartsquad playlist. Secondly, very strongly, Roger Moore, who I know was a film of... I keep coming up with this thing about his life is all a film. He was a friend of David's in real life right up until the end and was a real advocate for him. He was a true friend, is what David is saying. So Roger Moore, James Bond, of course. Clark Gable. And Humphrey Bogart. Those are the ones at the moment. Okay, but as I say, I'm not sure we're even going to mention them, but I just wanted to bring their energies in as well. Oh, and Grace Kelly, of course. There's this beautiful photograph here. Look at that. You see, this is the style of a bygone era, isn't it? I joked on the end of my Princess Diana video that I was going to be sitting down with David soon and I would come in some glamorous ensemble. But actually what I chose to wear today for this, and it feels completely fitting, is I've got a pair of cargo pants on, trousers as we call them in the UK, and like army colour cargo pants, and like this, it feels very army-like. And of course, he was the army blood was also in his veins. That was the other point I wanted to make on lineage. So the lineage of King David and the lineage of army also ran through his veins as well. Okay, as you can see, there's just so much. It's like I really don't know where to start with all of these people. But then again, I suppose that's the sign of a life well lived, isn't it? That's the quality of a truly great life, where you sit down to interview, channel, whatever you want to call it, and it's like, where the hell do we start? I mean, look at this book. This is 525 pages. This is just 2 books that he's written. So just slightly daunting. Let's put you there, David. Okay. Frank Sinatra is the other one as well that I feel, when I say around David, it just as though, I remember, he's the gatekeeper. He is, he has the potential to bring these people in. Okay, talking about let's bring him in, I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to film this little bit for a little excerpt on Instagram. And I'm going to use the Rainbow Bridge spray. Okay, so Rainbow Bridge spray just helps me connect to spirit. And let's just do that now and bring formally in the energy of David Niven, although we know he's already here. It's quite funny because I had described earlier that he was sitting in this sort of director's chair with his arms crossed like that, just like intensely listening and, you know, very much part of it all. And now he's just got up from the chair and he's taken a bow like that. And he's wearing a top hat, and he's wearing what you would call, what do you call it? Black tie. So, you know, like the formal suit, there's a little dicky bow. His shoes are impeccably polished. He's got a cane in his hand as well. I'm also feeling the energy of Fred Astaire around him as well. I think he knew Fred Astaire. But anyway, it's not Fred Astaire that I'm seeing, it's David Niven. He's got a cane, he's got the top hat, he's got the black tie suit on, and he's got the twinkle in his eye, and he's just giving a bow. Okay, right. Ever the showman, he says, ever the showman. Okay, and it's like he is wanting to dance. It's a funny one. It's like he's wanting to tap dance, and I'm just having to double check this isn't a stare. It's not. There's something about wanting to. What it is he feels really happy to be back in the spotlight. It's as though he has felt. He says this is ego, maybe slightly disregarded or forgotten. He says it's as though I've been in the dusty annals of time, you know, in some drawer marked closed, done. And he says it's so nice, and he's so thankful and appreciative of us just tuning in to want to hear from him again, and be in his presence once again. So it's like he's wanting to do a little jig. He's also taking me back to the early days of Hollywood, and he's showing me Laurel and Hardy as well. Didn't one of them have a cane, I think? Yeah, it was Hardy, the thinner one. He had a cane, didn't he? He said it's all about the props. So he's talking about props, and we're back to Hollywood and the props that you were given that helped to bring a part alive or bring a character alive. And it's almost like he's wanting to give a round of applause to all of the people who helped him to be David Niven on the big screen. He says there are so many people behind the scenes that you never see with regard to lights, cameras, action. And I noticed that with his energy as I came to record this today, because I've got a ring light on there, which isn't actually very effective today because it's quite a bright day anyway. Maybe I don't need it. But it was like he was interested in the fact the lights were going on, the camera was about to be switched on. It's like it's action time. He said many actors have this thing of waiting in the shadows of their life. It's almost like waiting in the shadows of life, and then when the cameras come on and you spring to life. He loved the whole sensory experience of being an actor. This thing about the smell of it, the grease paint, is that the right word? The makeup basically, the smell, the sounds, the people, the hustle and bustle, the movers and shakers, the phone calls, all of the whole climate of it. It has a whole sensory climate that is associated with the era that he grew up in and that he was making films in. And he's now showing me behind the scenes in terms of the dressing rooms, and I'm being shown those big mirrors with, the big what are they called? The lights around the mirrors. And he's showing me, it's a woman, I'm not sure who it is, to be honest. She's got her hair up in a, like an old, well, not old fashioned, but it was of the day, a style, a bit like a Grace Kelly type style. I don't think it's Grace Kelly that he's showing me, but it's just, I get the impression that he was, when I say sniffing around the dressing rooms, I don't mean that in a salacious way. It's just he was fascinated by the dressing rooms and the glamour of it, and the clothes and the costumes and the makeup and the transformation of women, and men, he's saying, in terms of what you could do with a face, in terms of makeup, and how they could then, and they can even more so now, create characters through exquisite skill and ability to be able to paint something onto a face that then you can become as an actor. You step into. You don't just step into the clothes. You step into the face that they've painted onto you. Yeah. Okay. So he's showing me all of that. All right. I might actually like to go, David, if you don't mind, right to the end of your life to start with. It's almost like I want to work backwards. So the end of your life, you suffered from motor neurone disease. And I have read something which linked into that your communication skills became compromised. So the man who was a great raconteur in life was all about communication. His voice was very... he had a beautiful speaking voice, really beautiful speaking voice. I can still hear it now. And so that was sort of robbed and taken away to a degree, or communication became more difficult or more painful, certainly not as frequent. So again, this is part of the reason why he's so excited. It's like he is like an excitable puppy, actually, type energy. It's like he's been given his voice back through this medium to be able to speak again. And it's like it's so freeing. It's so wonderful to him to be able to converse in this way. He was always about communication. Yes, okay. So motor neurone disease and the end of your life. Is there anything that you would like to say there? Okay, what he's showing me is he's using the analogy of the sun. So I said at the beginning that he's born on the 1st of March. Number 1 is linked into the sun. He shone very brightly through his life, through all the different passages of his life. These are my words. I'm just interpreting the energy that I'm feeling here. Okay, so he's giving me the analogy of the sun that starts to fade. So I'm deducing from that, and I'm sure I'm accurate in that, bright star, bright light, somebody that would walk into a room and light up a room. If you were at a dinner party with David Niven, you would want to be sitting next to him because it would just be fascinating to be sat next to him. And he's actually showing me being at a dinner party, and he's chatting away about some, thing that's happened or a story, because he was all about stories. And the person next to him were really engaged with him. And then there's a person like 5 down, and they're trying to do that. They're trying to catch the story. So he was all about that. So it's all about sunshine, brightness, brightening up a room. He says, I tried to do that. I tried to be that light. But then at the end with the motor neurone disease, it's just like an eclipse. He's shown me it as an eclipse. So the light starts to move across the sun goes into shadow. The shadow is forced to, it makes us retreat into ourself a time of great reflection, a time of mulling things over in one's mind, going over the past, thinking about what is to come. But then very much like the eclipse of the sun then does come out again, but it's in the next life. So that's a beautiful analogy, isn't it? It's a really beautiful analogy of being, he's just showing me it as the eclipse. It's almost like his life was a bit like that, becoming brighter and then becoming dimmer, and then it ending, and then him going into the next life where your light is just magnified 1,000-fold, and there is nothing to cast shadow over the sun, as it were. Very lovely. Okay. Very hard for those that were around me, he says, as well, with the motor neurone disease. Hard to communicate. But he says I still had my empathy. So he's talking about empathy and sensitivity. So even though aspects were taken away with the illness, swallowing, I feel, eating, talking, it's all linked into this part of the anatomy, the throat and the gullet and all of that. He says, you're making me sound like a chicken, but he's laughing, but he knows it was a painful experience, wasting away as well, getting thinner, getting frailer, feeling as though maybe he needed a stick towards the end. I'm not entirely sure, because it's the reference to the cane at the beginning. But the cane that he's got now isn't anything linked into having to need it to walk. It's just something to make me look good, he says. But all the way through his life, even at the most difficult times, he always had the ability to bring humour into it and lightheartedness into it. And that's what he's doing now when he's referencing back. I'm feeling a loneliness as well, a loneliness at the end. But I think it's linked into his second marriage. Okay, so should we just talk a little bit about that second marriage then, David? So he married twice, David Niven. His first wife died very young of an accident. She fell down a staircase at a party. And I'll talk about her secondly. She was called Primi. His second wife, I can't pronounce her name, David. I'm so sorry. I'm so terrible with names. He says, don't worry, darling. Hijordis, something like that. Anyway, Dutch name, is that right? Dutch? Anyway, he's just saying, just call her H. Okay, what I've written down here, just to remind me to talk to you about it, is she became a chronic alcoholic. He was unfaithful to her. She was unfaithful to him. It was a marriage that was quite unhappy. David, what's he called? Roger Moore, after David's death, is on record for calling her out, basically, for the way that she was towards him. He's gone a bit tight-lipped because he's ever the gentleman and he doesn't want to cuss anybody. If you read his books, they're all about it, that he doesn't ever diss anybody. But I'm just feeling this sadness and this melancholy. Now, obviously, she's died as well now. Let me just feel what's the interaction between these two. Never the twain shall meet, I'm feeling. Never the twain shall meet. A very karmic relationship when they were here on Earth. Interesting, this energy of the king. He's showing me her as a queen in a previous life. Somebody who liked things just so, almost expected things to be served on a silver platter, but he's showing me it as a velvet cushion. I'm being shown her in a past life. This is his second wife, and it's as though, so the second life in a past life, it's like she's reclining on one of these chaise longues, and she's got, like this, for some reason there's a purple tasseled cushion being given to her, and it's got jewels on, and she's just taking from it. A sense of entitlement, he's saying, a sense of entitlement came through from that lifetime that she still had in the one she had with me. But equally, there's something about they knew each other in this life. There was unfinished business between them, very karmic. There was some karmic payback, basically, that David had to pay back towards her in the incarnation that they recently had together. And then it just feels like I'm just wanting to do that. It's done, it's dusted. It's like I don't feel that they are at all together or in the same realm or sphere or room, whatever you want to call it, in the dimension that they're in now. That's interesting. Again, he's taken me back to the past life before they reincarnated back again. He's showing me that this is really interesting. He's saying it was an arranged marriage in the past life. So they had a past life together where it was an arranged marriage. And I feel as though, this is fascinating. It feels as though H, I just want to call her H, had an arranged marriage with him, David Niven, in a past life. And it was against her will. So he was more compliant with it, or he was in a position, he was the one that she was, I wanted to say sold to. And so he didn't come off badly in that life, but she did. She really didn't want to be in that marriage. I feel like I want to keep saying she was sold to him. It almost feels like an energy of some sort of sultan type lifetime. Then in this lifetime they meet again, and I think again he's on record of saying that almost like the night before he married her, or a week before he married her, he said something along the lines of, I might be making the biggest mistake of my life, because he had that past life memory, even though it wasn't conscious, of, I'm not sure this is going to work out, because it didn't work out last time. So they get married, and then he has to keep paying back and paying back and paying back. And the whole life was about paying back. Nothing was ever right with her. Nothing would ever please her. Nothing would ever appease her. So he used to try very hard to do that, but it was like it just had no effect on her. She was oblivious to his charms. It's interesting. He's saying she was oblivious to my charms. So a man who's all about charming the ladies couldn't charm this lady, and it was very cold, very, very. I'm just feeling like coldness towards the end. And then he gets motor neurone disease and can't properly communicate, and he's having to go within, and his body's wasting away, and he's with this very cold lady who's also drinking heavily, and it's just sad. It's just sad. There's no other word for it, Amanda. It was just sad. Okay. Have you forgiven her? Has she forgiven you? Is it all done? Karma, whatever it was between you? Yes, it's done, he says. It's done. And I don't get any sense of malice or bad feeling from him to her. Just get the word sad. Okay. Can we go back to your first wife now then, David, as we're talking about wives? Okay, and yes, the first wife was called David Niven, and the story goes that they were at a party and they all started to play hide and seek, and she goes off in the dark, falls down a staircase into a cellar, opens a door basically, and it's got stairs, and she couldn't see there were stairs. She dies basically. Very tragic. So it's like tragedy. It's like both tragedy and sadness with both of these wives. Okay, so tell me a little bit about Primi. He says she was the one that was waiting for him when he crossed over. And he said she looked like an angel. She looked like an angel. He's just showing me her energy, and it feels like they are still together where they are now. And I'm just seeing all this white energy around her, a very pure energy. And he's wanting to take me back to the energy of Venus, because again, David Niven is a number 6 numerology. It's linked to Venus. Venus is linked to the Mother Mary energy, the feminine aspect. It's almost like this virgin purity, type thing. It's like she was the angel. She was the angel. He saw her as an angel when she was alive, and she's an angel after he died. And when I'm not saying she's got wings on her back, it's just I'm talking about an angelic frequency that she held. She was very pure. Too pure for me is what he's saying. So there's something coming through from him. It's a weird one. On one hand, he would have loved her to have journeyed with him through the life that he had. But he said, I would have let her down. I would have let her down and I would have hurt her, because I couldn't control myself around women. And I would have hurt her. She would have found out. She would have been destroyed by my actions. So there's almost like this sense of divine, I don't even know what to call it, but the fact that she didn't find out is a saving grace. Having said that, she knows exactly who he was when he was alive and what he did and how he behaved. And again, this angelic frequency that she has, she loves him through it. She just loves him. There's just like a strong love between these two. I never got over her, is what he's saying. I never got over her. And I tried to replace her too quickly with this other second wife, which led to disaster and ruin, he's saying, emotionally and spiritually and physically to a degree, certainly with her through the drinking and through me becoming smaller. He's shown me himself as a mouse. It's like she made him feel like a little mouse that couldn't move or speak without doing something wrong, or being whacked over the head. Not really, but just symbolically, energetically, felt very thwarted by her energy. But that was my lesson to learn, he says. So anything else with regard to Primi? Just going to turn off this camera here on Instagram. If you want to watch the rest of this, you need to go to YouTube. Bye. Okay, so Primi. He's prim in the name. Again, prim in the name. Primi. I don't know what prim is shortened for, but I'm being shown prim as in prim and proper. Okay, a good upstanding girl, a good Christian girl, a good, virtuous girl. So he says virtue and me with regard to women didn't always mix. So I just get this feeling that like she was too good for me type energy. But definitely they're still together. Okay. So let's see. I had some questions for you here, David. So the marriages. Let's just talk a little bit about the energy of Hollywood when you knew it and what you think of it. I mean, in many ways you've written it in that book, but let's just see what he wants to say about his experiences there that haven't already been told. He says it was a blast. He says it was great fun. He says it was of its day. I'm getting an itchy nose as I say that. Feeling like the energy of Bewitched, the lady in Bewitched, whatever that era was. I think that's round, he's talking about that. It was a blast, it was fun, it was of its day. It was irresponsible, he says. Irresponsible, immature, inane. Got all the eyes coming through again. Inane, immature, irresponsible. He's talking about the climate. There's this thing about, he's just giving me the feeling of Hollywood, of its day when he knew it. He says there were no consequences. People behaved badly. Actually, badly is not the word. He says poorly. Poorly is his word. People behaved poorly with no great reflection on the consequences of their actions. Selfishness, heightened times, everyone out for themselves. Egotism, as he's written in the introduction to that book. Nepotism, as he wrote in that book. You scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Climbing the greasy pole, in terms of ambition. But yet there were good chums there. There were good chums, means friends, in case people don't understand. There were good chums there. There were people that you could rely on, people that I held close to me, people that I was able to confide in. Realising early on there were many people that you could not confide in. I've just become aware as I'm speaking to you, and I'm going to have to go and get it, that there's a prayer wheel over there, a Buddhist prayer wheel, and I don't know whether you can hear it on the camera, it's starting to spin round and round. Okay, it's just this one, somebody gave it to me. It's because it's a sunny day, it's just going round and round. So I'm just going to put it on the carpet, but I think it's also a nod to his film Stairway to Heaven, or A Matter of Life and Death. Prayers to heaven. I'm getting pressure in my ears as soon as I'm talking about this. If you've watched the film, you'll understand. It's linked into altitude. It's linked into climbing the steps to heaven, to sit in front of a panel of ascended beings. They don't call them ascended beings in the film. It's just a panel that sort of manages where you go after you die, and it shows many people who have died during the wars, and they just arrive at heaven's door, and there are all these marshals that send them off to where they need to go, whether it's to rest, to do whatever, to connect with somebody that they had known before when they were alive. But it's all about climbing these steps to heaven, and the time that we are allotted on earth, and what we do with it, and how we spend it, and who we spend it with. And he's bringing that energy in now, linked into that film is really important for some reason. I mean, it is a great film. I watched it the other day myself. What do you want to say about that film? He says there's real truth in it. There's real truth in it. There's real nuggets of gold in it. There's also peace in it, he says. This thing that nobody is left behind, no soul is ever abandoned. However you die, whether it's in war or in peacetime, no soul is left behind. There are angels in heaven that account for every single soul and make sure that at their appointed time, that when they are meant to pass, that somebody is there to greet them, somebody is there to help them, somebody is there to steer them to wherever they need to go. And the intercession between heaven and earth as well, and the ease with which angels, for want of a better word, spirit, can come down to earth to help. But it's also something where we can access heavenly truths and spiritual insights by connecting into the guides. And he's now showing me Cary Grant. It was Cary Grant, wasn't it? The one from, what's it called? Oh, God, it's my favourite film. David, it's gone out of my head. Goodness sake. It's a Wonderful Life. Thank you. I'm seeing It's a Wonderful Life in my mind's eye now with the angel Clarence. And again, David's saying there's great truth in that film as well. That angels intercede, spirit intercedes at pivotal moments in people's life if it's not your time to go. And he's taking me back to his first wife, Primmy, and he's saying, as sad as it was her time to go. Even though the nature and the way that she went was horrific, it was her time to go. There's no such thing truly as an accident. It's all when you have a date and you're meant to go, you go, but you're always there's always somebody there to meet you, greet you, help you. Okay, so back to old Hollywood. So it's just this sense of not very grown up, I'm wanting to say. It's like the energy he's giving me is it's not very grown up. A lot of, and also a lot of manipulation, a lot of money, changing hands. But he says, I never got involved in anything salacious, or I just went in, did what I was asked to do, to the best of my ability in terms of the roles that I was given, and I enjoyed it, my time there. I feel privileged to have been able to have played in that way, is what he's saying. He says it's all a bit like an unregulated playground is how he's calling it. In the era that he was in when he was there, an unregulated playground with a lot of babies. He's talking about babies in terms of people behaving like babies, people that are immature, people that throw their toys out of the pram because they don't get their way, lots of drama queens. But he said rich variety of life in all its flavours, but also this undercurrent as well of slight seediness, and he showed me the drug energy as well, alcohol, drugs, zoning out. He showed me the parties. He says a lot of the people just not really present in everyday life. It's almost as though he's giving me this analogy. This is the best way that he can say it. He says, I always knew when the camera stopped rolling and they said cut, that was it. And I then went back to my normal life, or as normal as I could make it. He said some people never realised when it stopped, when the film stopped and reality sets in. He says, I was always very good at being able to divorce when I was acting and I was immersed in that culture, and then when I went back to wherever he lived and whatever he was doing. So actually in those moments, very grounded. Oh yes, I've written down here, just to remind myself, the old Hollywood names that he was giving me that I feel are around him. So I've already said Clark Gable, Frank Sinatra, Roger Moore, Grace Kelly. There's another one who wasn't an actress, but I feel around him. And because there's this royal thing with David. So remember, he's from the royal line of David, King David. There's an energy there that links him. Princess Margaret. And Princess Margaret is the Queen's sister in the UK. She died, I don't know when she died. Maybe was it the 80s as well? 70s, 80s, I'm not sure. But Princess Margaret was like a Princess Diana of her day, certainly in terms of her, I'm talking in terms of her glamour, okay? Very glamorous, very, very beautiful, very elegant. I'm seeing him around her as well. He says, I had a nose for royalty. He says, I had a nose for royalty. He's just showing me like sniffing, a bit like a dog. He says, sniffing like a dog around royalty. Princess Margaret, Grace Kelly, of course, the other one who married into the royal family in Monaco. Right. Let's touch on the war. There's a beautiful quote of David Niven's with regard to the war. Again, poignant. You see, poignant is something that seems to follow him through his life. I'm just going to see if I can find the quote because I photocopied a page. Oh, this is a nice one as well. This isn't about the war. This is a quote that I just copied. It said that at David Niven's funeral, the largest wreath was from the porters at Heathrow Airport with a card reading, to the finest gentleman who ever walked through these halls, he made a porter feel like a king. Can you, there's definitely a theme running all the way through this. It's like he was a king of Hollywood. Anyway, I can't find the quote now, but there's something he writes about an American friend, because he was an officer in the Second World War, okay? He was one of the, I think it was the day after the Second World War starts, he gets on a plane and leaves Hollywood to join the British Army. Flies back and joins the British Army. He does his service because it's in his blood. It's just there. It's in his blood. He has to do it, and he wants to do it. And he serves his time in the army. And he's one of the very few British actors in Hollywood that did that as well, by the way. But anyway, when the war ends, I don't know who it was, but an American friend of his asked him to visit the war grave of his son. David Niven goes to the war graves, I guess whether it's Belgium or France, I'm not quite sure, and finds this son's grave. And he said something along the lines of, and in that instance, when I saw his grave, I knew that there were 27,000 reasons why I would never speak about the war again. And what he meant by that was the 27,000 other graves that he saw on that day made him realise that those sons, daughters, all had stories that belonged to other people, other families that grieved. So who was he to come out and start blabbing, is the word he's using, about his experiences in the war when others had died and no longer could speak? Something along the lines of that. I'd like to ask him about it now, because sadly we are again in another war situation. And again, I'm sort of wondering whether that's partly why he's coming through as well. There's a few reasons why he's coming through. He says there's also vanity why I'm coming through again. He's a bit like I don't know what type of animal I'm trying to, it's like one of these animals that like jumps from subject to subject. He's got a very, very busy mind. It is quite hard to focus on one subject, because he's taking me here, there and everywhere. Because he's also saying another reason why he's coming through now, the vanity reason, is because they've just done the Death on the Nile remake. It's out now in the cinemas, I believe. Kenneth Branagh has just redone it with a star-studded cast. I haven't seen it because, to be perfectly honest, the old David Niven version takes a lot of beating, and I don't know whether I want to see the new one. He's just quite right. No, he's saying it with a smile on his face. He's quite happy that it's been redone, because he says it's brought me back to you. And you see, that's what he's like. He's got this ability to make every woman that he meets the centre of his attention. It's brought me back to you. That's exactly what it is. Can you feel how flattering that is? You know, he's saying it with a twinkle in his eye. You know, it's fine that they've remade it because it's brought me back to you, Amanda. You know, it's that thing. He has that ability, and he had that ability to do it with every single woman, to make them feel as though they're the centre of the universe, that they're the most important thing, that you have his complete undivided attention. That was his gift. Look at this picture again of him with Grace Kelly. I mean, does she not look completely enamoured? Or what I mean by that is just completely... They're totally in the moment with each other. You know, she's fascinated by him. He's giving her his full attention. There's a lot of men these days that can't do that. And actually, I'm just going to speak here. I think it's linked into, again, going back to David Niven, it's like he places women on this pedestal. It's like he really, truly wants to hear every word that they say. He's really interested in your lipstick colour or the colour of your hair. Have you done something different? I can hear him say, have you done something different today? I like the style of that dress. You look beautiful in that. Oh, what beautiful shoes. All of that. He's all about that. You know, a lot of men were just like, you know, you shave your hair off. And it's like, you know, it wouldn't even notice. David notices everything. It's like he's saying, because it's like making a woman feel like a queen. Making a woman feel like a queen. I mean, to be honest, Hollywood royalty, right there. King and queen of Hollywood. I mean, those two would have been great together, but obviously she went off and had a different path. Again, you see, there's something about the Grace Kelly energy, the tragedy there. Tragedy. Maybe bring her through another day. Anyway, back to the war. So the vanity reason, one of the reasons he's coming through is Death on the Nile remake. But I think he rates Kenneth Branagh. Do you rate Kenneth Branagh? Anything you want to say about that? He's a good director, is what he's saying. He's a good director. He's got a good vision. I feel like David was floating around a bit when that was being made, actually. He's saying he can't believe the quality of photography these days, the crispness of the imagery. It's almost like he's right behind the camera, looking at the quality of whether it's 4K, whatever it is. I don't know what all the terminology is. But again, when you watch an old film, even though it's in colour, you can see obviously it's a bit grainy, the quality isn't as it is today. In fact, I've just got myself a new iPhone and it's got one of these, three cameras on the back, and I'm blown away at the quality of the photos. It's just like, wow, I hadn't realised that the old one wasn't able to deliver what this one can. So it's what he's talking about. It's just like this. He's amazed by the quality of the colours, the sharpness. The whole high definition thing is just like a bit of a mystery to him. It's a beautiful thing, he's saying. It's a beautiful thing. He's quite fascinated by the whole artistic nature of it all and how it all comes together. I think he always was. So even though he went in and did his role and said his lines and did it to the best of his ability, he was very much about the whole environment, the whole culture, soaked it all up, as I've said earlier. Okay. So yes, we have sadly got the outbreak of war again. You said you never wanted to really talk about your experiences in the Second World War, which I respect. One of the quotes that I've seen from you, David, was that you said that going to war was was the only unselfish thing you ever did in your life. That's what he said, that going to war was the only time that it was the most unselfish thing he ever did in his life, implying that a lot of his other life... My camera just died, interestingly, as I was talking about the war. So this is about 15 minutes later. I've gone and got myself a cup of coffee, and whilst I was sorting the battery out, I thought, okay, we're going to talk about the war. It's a big subject. Let's go back to David's book. And I opened it on this particular page. If you've got it, page 165 of The Moon's a Balloon. And he's talking about the time when he first heard that the Second World War had broken out and him basically getting over to the UK. And I'm just going to read you a couple of paragraphs because it is so breathtakingly, beautifully well written. And it just transports you into that time and you can imagine yourself there. And then we will see what else he wants to say. I have just put some incense on, if you can see smoke coming across the screen, and there obviously is some noise from the gales that are blowing around the house at the moment, but it's a hot day. Right, there's a helicopter just going like that. It's just crossing my vision as I'm about to talk about him flying back to the UK. Right, I want to read to you this. So he's basically saying that he had just finished a film with Goldwyn. I think they were the... I don't know, the production house or something. And he says, I was pampered and spoiled at my every whim, and my every whim was catered to. When I asked for some of my old extra chums to be employed in the English country house sequences, they were immediately, and when I walked on the set, I thought it was the Crystal Palace. We finished shooting the film on September the 1st. The picture looked good and Goldwyn was delighted. My contract was munificent. Goldwyn's plans for me were the most exciting, and all this had happened in less than 4 years. But at the very moment when I was preening myself, something bigger than a weed was blowing into many people's gardens. Hitler, without a declaration of war, was invading Poland. Doug Jr., with his attractive new Virginia-born wife, Mary Lee, had chartered a yacht for a weekend trip to Catalonia. I was supposedly sailing across to join them in a small sloop, the Harula. Coote, I think is a friend, Coote and I drank an immense amount of rum at a party in the Balboa Yacht Club and did not quite make the tide. We were woken up at 6 a.m. by a man in a dinghy banging on the side of our boat. "You guys English?" We peered blearily over the side. "Yes." "Well, lots of luck. You've just declared war on Germany." We never spoke a word. We just went below and filled 2 teacups with warm gin. When we finally arrived at Catalonia and joined the others, we found a sombre group. Nobody knew quite what to do, and like millions all over the world, it was beginning to dawn on us that we were pawns in a game that had got out of control. After a gloomy couple of days, Coote and I sailed back. And then he goes on and he talks a little bit more and he makes the decision to come back. But the really poignant thing is that he talks about a friend, Felix, that he's been with. And this is just the last paragraph. Felix is German. This is the last paragraph of this particular bit. So he's talking about before they go off to war, basically. "In the early hours, we took 2 carefully selected girls to a nightclub, a Spanish one for Felix and a Norwegian one for me. And all the time we drank, and we drank without getting drunk. Towards dawn, Felix said, 'Let's go to the Vatican and all kiss a Swiss guard.' When we arrived, the sky above St. Peter's was changing from black to palest blue, and the iridescent beauty of the place was almost unearthly. The Spanish girl surreptitiously crossed herself. The Norwegian whispered irreverently in my ear, 'Every time in this place that I've been here, I've been groped.' Soon they were both asking to be taken home. Ungallantly, we did not accompany them, but this was our night and they sensed it. Alone in a little bistro, we drank Fontana di Candida as though they were never going to make any more, and still we didn't get drunk. Felix talked about the new ski lifts he was planning for Sun Valley, and I talked of the pictures I was going to make. A long silence enveloped us. Suddenly Felix slapped his glass down on the table and jumped to his feet. 'Let's say goodbye now,' he said, almost angrily. I stood up. I think we both wept. Anyway, drunk at last, we embraced and parted quickly. A few hours later, Felix headed northeast for the Brenner Pass to join the SS, and I headed northwest for the French border at Modane to join God knew what. And then he just writes, Felix was killed in Russia. This book is so beautifully written, and it so transports you to the time. And the sad thing is that humanity, we just keep going around in loops, don't we, with regards to war. The poignancy, I haven't read the book. I mean, I only got it last week and it's 500 pages. So David drew us to that in my coffee break. That was the page I opened it at. And it's very clear that what he's painting is a picture of life, just going along gaily and, you know, I suppose without much care in the world, pre the Second World War, his era, getting on with his life, having the big new contracts coming through, making his mark on Hollywood, all the pretty girls, all the parties, all of that. And then in one declaration, everything changes. And the group of friends that you're with, well, you find out that the friend that you're with then becomes the enemy that you have to kill. No wonder he didn't want to talk about it. I feel very choked up just reading his words. So let's just go back into David's energy and see what he might like to share with us, maybe about where we are now or the nature of war. He's saying alcohol got me through a lot of it. Okay, so the very clear message coming through is linked into the ones that declare war are never the ones that are down in the trenches or the ones that have to kill, maim, or hurt another in terms of being physically up close with them. He's showing me the energy of generals and, you know, people in higher places, higher ranks that make the commands, that have to, that make the master plans, and the ones, of course, that want the war to start in the first place are never the ones that are actually sent out to fight it. And he says it's always been thus, and it still seems to be thus. So what can you say to us now, David, in 2022 with regards to new I just want to say new wars in our world, because wars have never actually stopped. It's just they keep flaring up, as he's saying, at different places around our world. He's saying to me, you have to make hay whilst the sun shines. That's a very old-fashioned English expression. I don't know whether it's known in other places, but you have to make hay whilst the sun shines is his motto, which is to do with when life is good and happy, make sure that you enjoy the happiness and you enjoy the good times. And he's just showing me a person's life made up of, he's going back to the analogy of the weather, so clouds and sunshine, and sometimes there are these dark clouds that come over our world, which war may be one, famine would be another. He's saying the word famine as well, linking into the past, but equally it's still going on in our world right now, but it's not centre stage in the news. But when we have moments of happiness, when we have decades of happiness, when we have people around us that make us happy, when we have circumstances around us that make us happy, when it's a lovely sunny day like it is today, enjoy it, okay? So again, he's linking back to an earlier quote that I gave of his, which was, he was basically given a lot of money to write the second book, because the first book that he wrote sold something like 4 million copies, which is a lot. And it was very unexpected as a success. So the publisher said, okay, we want you to write another book. And he took the money and basically, he's quoted as saying he went off and spent it. And then about a year later, the publisher says, okay, well, how's the book doing? And he hadn't even started it. So he talks about, and it might be on the Michael Parkinson interview, of sort of like how hard he found it to sit down and focus and write. But he's saying it's also linked into this thing about just enjoying the moments of life. The sunny day, you know, it being one example, getting out in it, making the most of it. There's an energy of resourcefulness with him, of getting on with it, of making hay whilst the sun shines is what he's saying, okay. He's saying that war, for him anyway, he's saying don't misconstrue what he's saying here, but he says it was the making of him. What he means by that is it showed him depths to his character that he didn't know were there, strength that he didn't know was there. He says he still kept his basic personality through the war. One of you, actually, one of my followers, I think it might be somebody here on YouTube or Instagram, I'm not sure, because when I said I was going to channel David Niven, a few of you have come forward with your own personal stories of him, of like fathers or grandfathers that knew him or knew of him, or somebody knew him. And again, these stories that are passed on with regard to him. So many stories. And one of you said, whether it was a grandfather or whatever, had active service with David in the Second World War, and he had this energy where, you know, when you have to come out on, I don't know whether you call it parade or, you know, inspection, as an inspection or whatever, and he'd come out in a silly hat or something, you know, just to try and, I don't know, get a laugh or just lighten the spirit or just because it's who he was. There was a silliness there, and actually the world sometimes needs silliness. It needs eccentricity, idiosyncrasies, all of that, and he had that in spades. So okay, anything else you want to say with regard to where we are now, David? Advice for people, whether they're actually in the war zone or just watching from afar. He says it affects the whole world. The energy of war affects the whole world. He's showing me, he's going back to his day, that even the people that didn't have active service, people that maybe shirked it, turned away from it, tried to get out of it, he's showing me drinking. He's showing me a lot of drinking. People that took to drink, people that wanted to bury their head in the sands, people that wanted just to forget. He's saying after the war as well. He's talking about the number of men in particular who drank to forget. Not all, of course, but this thing about wanting to forget the horrors of war, almost with a blind faith that by forgetting it, somehow it wasn't going to reappear. But of course it never could be forgotten because it's seared into the soul. If you've had to undertake active service, it's seared into the soul. He says in a way you're never prepared for it, but actually in many ways you find that you can rise to the occasion, and that you have within yourself a resourcefulness and a strength and courage that you never knew you had. And he says that's what I mean by the war in some ways was the making of me, because I found my courage. I found some strength that I never knew that I had. I had surrounded myself for so long with what is a vain culture. He's talking about Hollywood, and here was the complete antithesis of that. Here was blood and guts and gore and dirt, and it was the contrast to the former which helped me to see the world in another way and give thanks for my life as well, to have more gratitude for the life that I then was able to carry on living after the war had finished. I think I'm right in saying that he eventually left the army because the peacekeeping side of it actually bored him. So there was this thing about being in active service when it was active that was the contrast for his basic personality and character that was necessary. Yeah. Okay. How do you view our world now, David, in the 21st century and everything that's going on around? He says there's a lot to be said for remembering and reminding yourself that you are all actors upon the stage, as Shakespeare said. That into each life comes the light and the shade, and each life is actually very short. To make the most of it whilst you can, to play the cards that you get given to the best of your ability, to appreciate those you have around you that are loyal and faithful, to enjoy yourself, looking back on your time at Earth and the energy of Earth. It's such a masterclass of teaching, of opportunity, of expression, of freedom. He says, yes, a word that he knows is discussed much at the moment, but he says actually it is a planet where you have freedom to explore so many different roles, including negative ones, including challenging ones, including even the absence of freedom. That is still an opportunity to be able to experience what that feels like. Very much like the actor takes many parts and can be the prisoner in the cell, and they can also be the grand adventurer. To start to see life more as the play, to make sure that the intervals that you have are nourishing, to surround yourself with a good cast and a good director. The director should be yourself, of course, he says, that you are in charge of the narrative of your life and how long you stay in particular scenes with particular people, with particular energies. But it is to be savoured. Would you like to come back? Yes, I feel the energy that he would. I feel like I'm just hearing the word encore. I feel there's another encore to come with his energy. Just trying to get a handle on when. It might not be for me to even be party to that information. I'm getting a tear forming in my right eye that wants to be released. And when that happens, it's always a sign for me that healing is occurring. So I actually feel there's something still being healed at some level with him. I actually feel, and I've said this before on many Heartsquad videos that I've done, that they often come to us because there's a healing that that we can help facilitate with them. And I know that sounds a weird thing, but it's what I really believe, that they come to us and they receive healing in the same way that they bring something to us, or they bring something up in us, or they inspire something in us. So it's like a two-way street. So we're helping him to heal something here, so that he can come back for his encore. He says they're bored. He says they're bored of me up here. I mean, again, it's that self-deprecating humour. I love that. They're bored of me up here. It's like, it's just such a beautiful spirit. I love his energy. So what are we helping you with here, David? It's interesting. He's saying to be truly heard. For a man that was such a good communicator, and it's all there in the books, but it's almost like, it's what he was saying earlier. It's almost like the books have been on a dusty shelf. He was so happy that his book was in the window of the charity shop, even though it was a charity shop, because it was like, well, I can still make centre stage. He was laughing, but it was like that. I'm still centre stage. I'm still in the. It's like, you haven't forgotten me. There's this energy of you haven't forgotten me. So I still think there's something with his energy whereby he didn't fully appreciate the impact that he made when he was here. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to revisit his work, reread his words, and actually get great nourishment from it. But equally, we help him to realise that actually you had a wonderful life. You had a wonderful life. The film It's a Wonderful Life, all of the people that you touched, that you didn't realise you touched. And I think that's what we're giving back to him. And it's almost like there's a bit of a tear here in terms of him truly being able to feel that, to be loved, to truly be loved in that way. I think the experience with his second wife was like chipping away at him, chipping away at his sense of self-worth and self-love. If you live with somebody who's a critic, every day of your life for years, it chips away at your soul and your being. So him coming back and being, I actually want to choose the word adored by many of us, is deeply nourishing for him as well, but not from an egotistical perspective, just from it was a wonderful life, David. You touched many of us. I mean, literally, when I saw him on the old film from 3 weeks ago, I was like, oh, I'd forgotten you. It literally was. It was like he was in the dusty drawer. I'd forgotten all about him. Get him back out again. And it's just beautiful. Reading, the books and watching the films, I was thinking about what his energy stands for. It feels very... I think we've almost forgotten how amazing it is when you're faced with a really multifaceted, fascinating character who's got so many stories on this, stories on that, travelled here, travelled there, met this person, met that person. It's a fascinating life. It's so interesting. And I think we've, the climate right now, it's like we've all been under this cloud, pandemic cloud. There hasn't been as much stimulus. thinking about the world of film, the films haven't been coming out, the production lines have all shut, it's starting to come back to life, but it's like we've missed all of the flavour. He brings such flavour, and he feels like this lovable granddad, It reminds me like of a grandfatherly type energy. He is of a bygone era, but that was another thing he said to me a few days ago, this thing about a bygone era. And into that I would put things such as wit, class, discretion, manners, old-fashioned decency, debonair type spirit, and I'd include that with the women as well. Look at these two, bygone era of a different age. And he said to me, yeah, but it's all within you. You've got it within you. Bring back this bygone era of a more elegant age, but without the debauchery, is what he's saying. He also, I got a reference to Scott Fitzgerald, and I think David Niven's on record of saying that he met Scott Fitzgerald and found him a terrible bore. You can just hear him saying a terrible bore or disappointment. But actually, I was shown the Great Gatsby in my mind. It's that type of energy of debauched parties. That side of Hollywood. So we're not wanting to bring that back, but bringing back the elegance, bringing back the refinement, bringing back wit, class. It's almost like it feels as though society's become a bit dumbed down, and we've got used to it. We've got used to a dumbed down entertainment industry, dumbed down music at some level, not all level. And he's just bringing it up. He's taking us up those steps again, and showing us there's a higher expression of everything, but coming at us in a very, I know he's spirit, but I just want to say in a very human way as well. It's like he's very aware of his flaws, very aware of the mistakes that he made. This is the thing about David Niven's energy, he never intentionally ever wanted to hurt anybody. He wouldn't have wanted to have hurt a fly. He just flitted through life like this glamorous dragonfly, basically. That's what I want to say. I was thinking about what animal is he? He's like a dragonfly. He's like this beautiful dragonfly, very delicate. I wonder whether he did dance, because I keep wanting him to dance. It's like there's an energy of dance with him. I don't know whether he did or not, but anyway. So for a first look at him, that's probably maybe where we're going to end it. He wants to end on a light-hearted note. In 1967, there was a film made called Casino Royale. It's like a spoof James Bond film, and David Niven was in it, because the point is that the writer of James Bond, Ian Fleming, is said to have said that he actually wanted David Niven to be James Bond. So there's just a bit of that James Bond energy. I know what David's doing here. Can you see what he's doing? He's making a link here for Roger Moore to come in at some point. His mate Roger Moore. Okay, let's just have a quick feel into that. So David Niven, Roger Moore. My God, what a couple of fun guys. Okay, he wants to say something serious about Roger Moore. And also it's linked into Audrey Hepburn as well. There's something about, going back to this thing about being at war was the most unselfish thing I ever did. Although I think, again, can you see that's he's not still appreciating the joy that he gave to people. That bringing joy to people and putting a smile on people's face, and for people to remember you fondly decades later, isn't anything to do with selfishness. That is an extraordinary gift to have given. Thank you for that, David. Do you actually hear what we're saying here? Yeah, he's gone very quiet. He is taking it in. It's quite humbling for him to really feel into that. But he was bringing in Roger Moore and Audrey Hepburn for their humanitarian work that they did. And he's very humbled, again, humbled by the fact that old Hollywood stars of his era did a lot of good, and those two in particular. So he's wanting to balance out what we've been saying earlier as well with regard to Hollywood, because, he's just wanting us to see it in its multifaceted energy. So I'm talking about the day that he knew it. I'm not talking about today's Hollywood. That yes, there was a shadow side to it, but there was also a lot of fun. There was a lot of laughs. There was a lot of hijinks, is what he's saying. There was a lot of good times, but there was also a lot of good deeds that came out of it as well. And there was some good people. And it's like Audrey Hepburn with her humanitarian work, Roger Moore with his humanitarian work. And he's very, what's the word? With regard to Roger Moore in particular, very impressed isn't the right word. Very proud that he was his friend and still is his friend. There's this pride that Roger Moore was my friend, you know. That's really lovely. Roger Moore was my friend, you know. Yeah. Okay. Right, so let's just tune into David and say goodbye to him for now. Never say goodbye is what he says. Never say goodbye. Always keep them wanting more. Yeah, okay. Are you just going to stay there for a little bit longer? I feel like he's just hanging around a bit, which is fine. You're quite happy to hang around. He wants to come see the horses with me. Oh, okay. I'm going off into the forest this afternoon for a walk, and where we're going, there's a lot of ponies. So that leads us full circle to bring on the empty horses. But these horses are not going to be empty. They're going to be very nourishing for you to be around as well, aren't they? And me. So the energy of the horse. I would sort of go and buy that painting, David, but I don't really like it. The one in the window that you showed me the other day. It's not really my style, but he says it'll find a right home, won't it? In the same way that your book found the right home with me. He says, yes, I'll guide. And just lastly, this thing about being a guide. I mean, I feel like, in all seriousness, you are going to be around me now, and you're going to be helping me with all sorts of things. How can you help other people that are watching this, or do you want to help other people? Or, yeah, he's like, let's have a party. He's wanting us to lighten up, to this thing about being the life and soul of the party. I want to help people create stories, he's saying, and he's talking about life stories. He's talking about great experiences. So he's saying to me for today, for example, I'm probably not going to do this, but I'm going out into the New Forest, but he's saying, well, why don't you take a picnic rug and a bottle of champagne? You know, it's like, why not? You know, why would you not do that? Do you see what I mean? It's just like create a moment, create a memory, you know, that type of thing. Take the mundane up to the extraordinary. Every day can be like that, okay? So he's wanting to help us lift the mundane into the extraordinary, to help or prompt us to have moments in our life where when we're much older, we can look back and with a smile on that particular day. Oh yeah, I did that. Do you remember when I did that? Do you remember when I said what is all that type of stuff? So life is just a stage, he says. Make sure you set it as beautifully as you can and you enjoy every moment. Okay. I'm now seeing him dressed in white for some reason. He's now got a white hat. I definitely feel the energy of Fred Astaire around as well. Diamond hat coming in as well. Was that Fred Astaire wore that? It's just like morphing into different energies now. Because he represents Hollywood. I'm wanting to say like the king of Hollywood, and it's like he's wanting to bring all the other players onto the stage for us to remember them. But it's about remembering the old Hollywood. And my favourite expression at the moment, if you follow me, is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it's like this thing about when we move on and we become more evolved, supposedly, and we're all, you know, we've got our 4K phones. I don't mean everyone has. I'm just meaning that, you know, if technology is evolving all of the time, and it's like, oh, have you seen this? And this new type of technology that's in this film, and you know, God forbid the meta whatever it is, which I don't even want to get into, but I don't want to go there, David. I don't want to be part of that metaverse, or I can't think of anything worse. But, you know, it's like go back to that bygone era of just like Cary Grant, David Niven, Grace Kelly, Audrey Hepburn, all of it. It was beautiful. It nourishes your soul, but remember, it's also still within you. Right, I must go and get ready for my walk in the forest, and I will definitely, if I don't have a glass of champagne, I might stop off in a stop off in a pub on the way back and raise a glass to David Niven, a glass of wine. Cheers, David. Thank you so much. Thanks for the laughs. Thanks for the joy. Thanks for the elegance. Thanks for all of it. I've loved being in your company. I hope you've loved being in his company too. Take care. Like the video so other people will see it. Subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed it. There's about another, God knows how many videos I've done channeling all sorts of different stars from screen, stage, etc. They're called Heartsquad. It's a playlist on my channel. Take a look back if you've enjoyed this one. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye for now. Signing out. Should we do a cut, David? Cut! Bye.